Hello, today we're going to solve linear equations. Linear equations just means there's one variable. We're going to solve equations in one variable with um, what are commonly called two-step equations. Two-step equations. And the two steps are to add or subtract and then multiply and divide. But we're actually going to include three steps. So I'm going to write the three steps like this. Number one, simplify. Now, what you should remember or know is that when you simplify an expression. And when we're solving equations, we have an expression on the left side and an expression on the right side. Sometimes those expressions can be simplified, and if they can, we should simplify both of them. But we're not going to do anything over the equal sign. So from one side to the other, we're not changing anything from one side to the other. We're just looking at the left side, is it as simple as it can be, and looking at the right side. Then step number two, we're going to add the opposite. We've already done this, adding in one-step equations, adding the opposite to both sides. Whatever's being done to the variable, whatever's being done to x or y or q or whatever it is, we're going to do the opposite with addition. So if there's something being added or subtracted, we're going to add the opposite. Then we will multiply or divide. We'll do the opposite in terms of multiplication or division. So if something's being multiplied by the variable, we'll divide by that same something. Something's being divided, we'll multiply. Okay, so let's take a look at our first question here, and this one is a true two-step equation because we have the left side expression, 3y or 3 times y minus 12 can't be simplified at all. The right-hand expression can't be simplified either, it's just 0. But there is something being subtracted from y, it's minus 12, so I'm going to add the opposite of that. The opposite of negative 12 or minus 12 is plus 12. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side, and I show myself that I'm doing this, and then I simplify. 3y minus 12 plus 12 is just 3y. And 0 plus 12 is just 12. Now we're on to step 3. What's being done to y? Well, it's being multiplied by 3. What's the opposite of times 3? Divide by 3. So I show myself by using a fraction bar. 3y divided by 3 is 1y. And 12 divided by 3 is 4. And there it is. There's my final answer, y equals 4. At least I think that's the final answer. But you know, on these problems, there should never be a question of thinking, I have the answer, I should know. So I go back to my original equation, 3y minus 12 equals 0, and I plug in my solution, what I think y equals, in place of y. 3 times 4 minus 12 equals 0. Well, 3 times 4 is 12, and 12 minus 12 does indeed equal 0. So I checked it out. It works. And so my answer is, without a doubt, unquestionably, y equals 4. I want you to show your steps just like this and to check your solutions on every single problem of this type that you do. It will save you so much time later on. Okay, let's go through these steps again. 7 minus y equals 9. There's a number there that's not being multiplied by y, but it's being added or subtracted, and it's the number that is 7. Notice we can't simplify the left or the right side, so we're just going to leave that alone. We have that 7, we want to get rid of the 7, and it's not, even though it's a subtraction problem, 7 minus y, the 7 itself is positive. And so in order to get rid of the 7, even though I'm tempted to say the opposite of what's going on there is addition, But what's being subtracted is the y, not the 7. So the 7 is positive. Let's get rid of that 7 by adding negative 7 to both sides. 7 minus 7 is 0. But that doesn't deal with the negative or the minus sign next to the y. So minus y or negative y comes on down. And then 9 minus 7 is 2. Now you may remember doing problems like this before. Negative y equals 2. Remember that means negative 1 times y equals 2. And the opposite of times negative 1 is divide by negative 1. So we get rid of that negative sign by dividing by negative 1. Y equals 2 divided by negative 1, which is negative 2. And check this mentally. It does really make sense that if negative y equals positive 2, then positive y must equal negative 2. Well, let's check our answer. Remember, the original problem was 7 minus y equals 9. I'm going to rewrite that as 7 minus negative 2 equals 9. And got to be careful with all those negatives flying around. I need to put parentheses around where the y was. So it's minus negative, which is the same as positive. Minus negative is a plus. 7 plus 2 equals 9, and that sure is true. Okay, now let's go on to question number 3. And this is a trick question because we have an x on the left side and an x on the right side. And I wanted to show you this question because it does show up every once in a while, so let's go ahead and get it out of the way now. This would technically be a 4-step equation because we still haven't done any simplifying on either side. But we have x on the left, x on the right. I want to get rid of one of those. So I'm going to get rid of the smaller one. I always pick the smaller one, so I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. And 3x minus 3x is 0, and 8 minus 3x is 5x. Now that takes care of this part, but everything else needs to be brought down. So minus 4, equal sign, and the 1, or the plus 1, positive 1. What's being done to x? It's being subtracted, minus 4, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And I end up with 5 equals 5x. Now what's being done to x? It's being multiplied by 5. I'm going to divide by 5, both sides. And I end up with x equals 5 divided by 5 is 1. If you like, you can at this point turn it around and say x equals 1 instead of 1 equals x. But for sure, we need to rewrite this entire equation. 3x plus 1 equals 8x minus 4. And we'll plug this in. 3 times 1 plus 1 equals 8 times 1 minus 4. 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1. 8 times 1 is 8 minus 4. 3 plus 1 is 4. And 8 minus 4 is 4. And so it's true that when x equals 1, this sentence is true. And if you wonder about this, at this point you probably should be asking yourself, well, how do I know that 1 is the only answer? Try some other answers and just see if there's any other number that makes this true. And of course, you'll find right away that there is none. All right, let's go back to that 3-step equation where we have something that can be done on the left side or the right side. In this case, 2 times the quantity x plus 4, or 5, 2 times in parentheses x plus 5, we can do that. The distributive property allows us to do that. So I'm going to write 2 times x plus 2 times 5, which is 10, equals negative 8. Getting ahead of myself there. Negative 8. And now I have my 2-step equation with no more simplification possible. What's being done to x? Well, it's being multiplied by 2, but it's also being added to by the 10. So I'm going to undo that first, undo the addition or subtraction by adding the opposite, minus 10. minus 10. That gives me 2x plus 0, or just 2x, equals negative 18. We'll divide by the 2 now. We'll undo the times 2, so we'll divide by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, 1x. Negative 18 divided by 2 is negative 9. Now I'm going to go back and rewrite the problem again. 2 times x plus 5 equals negative 8. Well, negative 9 plus 5 is negative 4. And 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. So it's true, and we found our solution. I always like to put a nice big box around the final answer so don't get confused and think that negative 8 equals negative 8 is my answer. That was the last thing I did. That was just checking. All right. Let's take a look at the next one. We have, again, the situation where there is some stuff on the left side that can be simplified. Negative 1 times the quantity y. I think that was supposed to be minus 3. I apologize, it's a typo. So I'm going to distribute the negative 1. Now I have no clue if it's supposed to be minus 3 or plus 3 because it's probably supposed to be plus 3. Let's do that. Okay, so negative 1 times y is negative y. Negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. And now what's being done to y? We're subtracting 3, so we'll do the opposite to both sides, add 3 to both sides, and we end up with negative y equals 13. Now what's being done to y? Well, it's got a negative sign in front of it. You can think of it as negative 1 times y, so I'm going to divide by negative 1, and I get y equals negative 13. I think that's the answer, but let's check. Negative 1 times negative 13 plus 3 equals 10. Well, negative 13 plus 3 is negative 10. Multiply negative 1 times negative 10 and you do get 10, and so we are happy with that answer. Let's do 2 more. So we'll do these fairly quickly. So hit pause and try this yourself. See what you can do with these problems. 6 minus x equals 4. It seems fairly straightforward. This again is that trick question where the 6 is being added or subtracted with the x. It looks like it's subtraction, 6 minus x, but the 6 itself is positive. So we're going to subtract 6 from both sides, if I can write properly. 6 minus 6 is 0, minus x is negative x. And 4 minus 6 is negative 2. Then we'll divide by the thing being multiplied by x. Well, it's negative 1 times x, so we're going to divide by negative 1. And that gives us x equals 2. Plug this back in. 6 minus 2 equals 4. 6 minus 2 does equal 4, so there we have it. And finally, we're going to distribute on the left side of the equal sign and on the right side of the equal sign. 6 times 5 is 30, plus 6 times c is 6c. 5 times c is 5c, and 5 times negative 4 is negative 20. Now, I have a c on the left side and on the right side, so I'm going to have to get rid of one of those. I can get rid of the smaller one, so 5c, and get rid of 5c by subtracting 5c from both sides. So 30, 6c minus 5c is 1c, equals 5c minus 5c is 0, minus 20 is negative 20. So 30 plus c equals negative 20. I'll get rid of the 30 there by subtracting 30 from both sides. and I end up with C equals negative 50, which is an ugly answer, but let's see if it works. So we'll go back to our original equation. 6 times 5 plus C equals 5 times C minus 4. We think C is negative 50, so 6 times 5 plus negative 50 equals 5 times negative 50 minus 4. Well, 5 plus negative 50 is negative 45. And negative 50 minus 4 is negative 54. Now at this point I might want to pull out my calculator. I won't. I'm going to do this longhand, but you can certainly make the transition to using a calculator now, because calculator isn't going to tell you the answer to an equation, but it will help you do calculations like this. 6 times 5 is 30, carry the 3, 6 times 4 is 24, plus 3 is 27. It's negative, so negative 270. Now let's try it with 5 times negative 54. Negative 54 times 5, that's 20. 25 plus 2 is 27. It's also negative 270. And they're both negative 270 when x or c equals negative 50, so c equals negative 50 does indeed make this sentence true. That was a tricky one. Thank you very much for watching with me, and you have a great day.